Good morning. It's Tuesday, September the 11th, and this is The Drill. And thank you very much. And this is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States of America, because I'm the only one that makes the presumption for the status quo. So I had a couple of thoughts. First of all, I wanted to talk a little bit about our culture and the foundations of our culture, and I also wanted to touch a little bit on 9/11 and terrorism in general. So, first of all, though, things in life are foundational. The philosophy informs our culture informs our politics. Okay, it doesn't happen necessarily right away. It may take things, decades to bubble up and permeate our culture, and then once our culture gets to a certain point, then that is going to inform our politics. So, hedonism is a philosophy that goes way back, 2,000 years. And the motto of hedonism is, if it feels good, do it. It's a recipe or a philosophy or an attitude about impulsivity, or as Ayn Rand so awkwardly put it, whim worshipping. So, and that informs our politics. That and the culture of convenience informs our politics relative to abortion. Okay, that's basically what abortion is about. It's about convenience, and it's about acting on the spur of the moment. I feel like having sex right now, so I don't have to worry about birth control, and I don't have to worry. I don't have to worry about the consequences. I can just go ahead and have sex, and if there's a pregnancy is created, the girl's not on the pill or it doesn't work, then we just get an abortion and move on. And which reminds me also, by the way, that it was, and she was right about this, one of the feminist leaders from the 60s and 70s, Gloria Steinem, that said all of the advances that were made for women and designed for women have benefited men. And if you think about it, you're going to realize that's true, especially with the case of abortion, where abortion is a boon. It's great for men, especially if you're 18 to 25 years old, you're a frat boy and you want to go out and sow your wild oats every weekend, then abortion is fabulous. So for women are the ones that end up having to bear the cost. They're the ones that have to go out and buy the pill. It isn't the boys or the guys that pay for that. It's the women that pay for that, and the women that pay financially and every other way for abortions, while the men go out and go off Johnny Jolly and are screwing somebody else. So if you're, that's one of the situations where the left pretends to be talking to women when they talk about women's issues and women's health, and they pretend politically to be speaking to women, but they're not. They're speaking to men. They're speaking really to 18 to 25-year-old men when they say that Republicans are going to take away the pill, they're going to take away abortion, and you watch. If anybody does say that, watch the votes from 18 to 25-year-old men just dry up, because that's who the message is really going to. Hey, you want to sow your wild oats? Well, guess what? These people are going to take away your means to do that. But the point is that the cultural underpinnings of that is the philosophy, or, ultimately the philosophy of hedonism, or the philosophical theory of hedonism, and the cultural attitude that if it feels good, do it, which is, again, the attitude is impulsivity. Be impulsive and do whatever you feel like at the moment, which is basically a recipe for death and other types of disaster. There was a video that I saw on YouTube from India. There was an electric train, one of the light trains like we have here in California, the Gold Line, the Blue Line, etc. And so it's a I guess a security camera shot. It's a still, it doesn't move, and so it's just showing the train, and there's a crowd milling around outside the train. And so then all of a sudden, from the left, you see this very tall man walking on the train. He's up on top of the train, just very casually strolling along the train. And then all of a sudden, just very casually, he reaches up and touches one of the wires. And that's it. He, instant death, and instant gory, gruesome, nasty, violent death. He was burning, and his hand was stuck to the wire, so it was disgusting to watch this. But that was hedonism in action. He acted impulsively. He didn't plan any of this. Okay, it was obvious by the way he was moving and whatnot that, again, he thought it would feel good to just jump up on this train and just stroll along and act like he owned the joint, and then, just casually touch one of the wires, he thinks that everything is, again, he's just going to, if it feels good, do it. It felt good to get on the train, reach up, touch the wire, or so he thought, until he actually does it, and guess what? He ends up dying a painful and gruesome death. And that's what hedonism holds in store for you. It's a lie, and it's a trap. But that's the thing, that if you're going to get rid of abortion, if you want to get rid of anything politically in our country, you have to deal with the cultural underpinnings. What is the cultural support for it? The idea that everything in life should be convenient and should be made convenient. It used to be that if you wanted to register to vote, you had to make the effort. You had to go to a place and register yourself to vote. Now, they try to make it as convenient as possible. In California, it can be done when you're renewing your driver's license. I think they may be also doing it when you're registering or re-registering your vehicle. But it's done through the DMV to make it ultra convenient, because, good God, we wouldn't want people to actually have to spend the time and the energy driving to wherever, the post office, or to the county registrar's office to go ahead and get signed up to vote. We wouldn't want that to happen. We wouldn't want to inconvenience anybody. So, and another one example of this is the idea of the attitudes towards work. It used to be that work was considered something that was honorable in and of itself. It had an intrinsic value. And now, today, work is just merely a means to an end. It's about getting a paycheck. And that's the way work is always looked at. So those are attitudes that can be changed. And that's one of the ways that we get to, also, by the way, to welfare and whatnot. Because then you get into issues of, is it better to work at a menial job than to do nothing? And today's cultural atmosphere, the answer is no. It would be much better, preferable. I'm too good to flip burgers. I remember had a friend of mine that was homeless, and he had a bachelor's degree in business, so he's homeless and whatnot. And so I was working as a security guard, and so we were talking about, because he was wanting to get off the street or whatever, and I said, what you can do is get a job as a security guard. And he says, "Oh, I won't be a security guard," as though I had, I don't know, asked him to shovel poop or something. Even that, I mean, if it's honorable work, you're getting honest pay for an honest day's work, whether it's shoveling poop, digging a ditch, being a security guard, flipping a burger. It doesn't matter, and it didn't used to, but now culturally there's the attitude that people have that they're too good for certain jobs, that they are, now in his case, he's overqualified, because he's got a bachelor's degree. But still, it used to be that decades ago that people would do whatever they had to. The main point was to remain employed. Okay, and if you had to take a job that was less than that, damn it, that's what you did. Some of that also falls on unions. That I remember that there was a strike, an auto worker strike, and this man and his family were living in a tent outdoors somewhere because the strike had gone on so long, and they couldn't afford to live in a house or an apartment. And I thought, and somehow it came up, I think, to a television analyst. The question came up, why doesn't he go out and get another job? Get something to feed his family or keep a roof over his head. And the analyst was told that you can't do that according to union rules if you want to maintain your seniority. If you go out and get another non-union job, even if it's just to keep a roof over your head or to survive, you automatically go to the back of the list, the bottom of the list in terms of seniority. So when they start hiring again, when the strike is over, you're going to be the last one hired or replaced, put back in your position. So again, here's a situation where apparently it's better to be idle than it is to be engaged in work. But still, even so, decades and decades ago, people would have done it anyhow because it was a cultural thing in this country backed by Christianity, which says that idle hands are the devil's workshop. And so that was what was drilled into people as you were growing up, that you want to be productive, that you need to work. And it's not always about, and it wasn't so much about pay, but about the work itself, and that work itself is ennobling. So those are the things that you have to do. And the true conservative looks deeper than just politics, looks at our culture, and looks at the things that need to change in our culture that will provide the changes to our political. If we want to get rid of welfare, we have to change our attitude towards work. A lot of my political beliefs can be summed up with go back. Let's go back. Okay? Let's go back to the time culturally when work was ennobling. We didn't have the attitude that I'm too good to do X, Y, Z. Okay? So this reminds me also of another homeless guy that I saw the other day. I've seen around near the grocery store where I shop at, and seen him for months hanging around there. And somebody pulled up once and got out of their car and said, "Hey, how would you like a job?" Now, again, decades ago, if this was the economy, or if it was me, because I've been in tough situations before, and anyhow, they say to him, would you like a job? His answer was, in the form of a question, what kind of job? Here's a guy who's living on the street. He's got all his possessions in a backpack, and he wants to know what kind of job. I would think that what you would do is say, do you want a job? Yes, I do. What do you want me to do? What do you got? Where's the info? Now, if it turns out that you're being asked to do something you're unqualified to do or incapable of doing, fine, you can do that later. But it would seem to me, again, just from a work as ennobling standpoint. But that's not the attitude today. The attitude is that work is simply a means to an end, a way of getting a paycheck towards it's a materialistic, and that work has no deeper spiritual value. And so until we go back to a society that values work for itself and not just as a means to an end, we'll never get rid of welfare or anything like that. The same thing goes with abortion. If we're ever going to get rid of abortion, we have to get rid of the idea of convenience, that that life is all about what's most convenient for you. It's and also about hedonism. We have to get rid of the idea that if it feels good, do it mentality. That has to go. And we didn't used to have that mentality. That was brought up in the 60s. So anyhow, and about as far as 9/11 is concerned, I did want to touch on a little bit on terrorism. And first of all, one of the things that it seems to me that, because it doesn't work, none of the terrorists are really getting anywhere. Their main aim, of course, like socialists, is to try to create a worldwide revolution where the entire world becomes Islamic. And the socialists, of course, want a world that's secular and socialistic. So, but they're not getting anywhere. Nobody rises up, and there's no big revolution happening or going to happen. And I think part of the reason is that the contradictions that the terrorists are putting off is obvious. That, for instance, they want to revert, just like the socialists do, they want to revert to the way people lived hundreds of years ago. Get rid of modern conveniences. No microwave ovens, no automobiles, no nothing. We would get around either by walking or on horseback, and we would be an agrarian. We would everybody would plant and consume their own food, that kind of thing. But the thing is that while they're going out and fighting, they're more than willing to use modern conveniences. They'll use automobiles, they'll use tanks, they'll use AK-47s, they'll use modern bomb-making equipment, and the like. They don't use... I think if they really wanted to spark people's imagination, you're going to attack somebody, get on horseback, get swords, bows, and arrows, and do it that way. And I think that at least then you're consistent. Yeah, you're going to get slaughtered, but again, you're looking forward to 72 virgins anyways, and you're involved in a religious jihad. It shouldn't bother you. So there's that inconsistency, and many others. Also the idea of terrorism that originally the way it went was a terrorist was somebody who would commit an act of terrorism, usually assassination, and then sit and wait for the authorities to arrest them, prosecute them, put them on trial, and possibly give them the death penalty. But they would commit their assassination and just calmly sit and wait. Today's terrorists don't do that, and they flee. They either flee directly by actually running away, or they flee indirectly by having themselves destroyed by the bomb or the bomb that they're making, or destroyed in some other way, committing suicide, as a matter of fact. And in so doing, by fleeing, it suggests that there's, first of all, consciousness of guilt, and that you're not too terribly sure of you don't have the courage of your convictions. Because if they had the courage of their convictions, like the plane, the people that attacked the Twin Towers on 9/11, if they had done something similar but presented themselves, or perhaps even best, if Osama bin Laden, after these attacks were carried out, had simply come out of hiding and said, you know what, I'm the mastermind behind this, turn himself to American authorities, and willingly put himself on trial and submit himself to trial and prosecution and very possibly the death penalty. Submit yourself to that willingly, and I think that would go a longer way towards being terroristic than running or fleeing. And all of them do it. Nobody wants to be in Gitmo. Everybody wants to get out of jail. They want something for nothing, just like most modern secular people do as well. But the problem is, then it creates a contradiction, and it makes it very difficult to take these terrorists seriously. That what they're after is that their motivations are spiritual, are religious, are deeper, more than skin deep, and in reality, they're not. So today, a couple of things. Rush Limbaugh's back on the radio, and welcome back, Rush. That's great. And so there's something, a clip that I want to, or a transcript that I want to read, and then after that, it's going to be philosophy according to House, and philosophy, the philosophy of Breaking Bad. So when I come back. Okay, thank you very much. Welcome back. And so Rush was off for a week, came back yesterday. And so, because when he's off, they don't do transcripts of the guest hosts. Or they actually do have transcripts, but you have to be a Rush 24/7 subscriber in order to be able to access them. For some reason. I don't know why. It doesn't make much sense, but that's the way they do it. So there's not much I can comment on from last week. So, but he's back, and I thought this was a particularly interesting clip here from his app, from the Rush Limbaugh app, which is from the Rush Limbaugh Show. Rush. Now, I'm sure a lot of you people are going to disagree with me on this, but I actually think I picked a pretty good week to be gone last week. I mean, I was in the middle of it, too, just like you were, and I had some initial reactions, especially when that anonymous New York Times piece came out. By the way, I don't think anybody but somebody at the New York Times wrote that. I don't think there's somebody in the White House or in the administration that wrote that thing. I think it's all made up, but we'll get to that in a minute. So, real quick, he hits it on the bullseye. Every once in a while, Rush Limbaugh hits the nail right on the head, and he does here. I believe the same way. I don't have any evidence of it as to who wrote it, but it seems to me to make sense, knowing that the left's MO, modus operandi, is psychology. They're always trying to psych people out. And what better way to do it than to write an anonymous piece in which you claim that you're a traitor in the Trump White House. What a better way to get people rattled. And it seemed to work. Trump responded as though this was legit. The vice president did. The communications secretary, Sarah Sanders, responded to it also that way. I would have done, if I was Donald Trump, is say the same thing Rush Limbaugh did, is say it's a lie, it's fiction, no such person as described in this op-ed works in the White House. Back to Rush. As I look back on it, there wasn't any real news last week. There's just a bunch of ginned up hysteria from the media and from the American left. The Democrat Party, who want you to focus on what it is that upsets them, they remain obsessed with changing your minds. They remain obsessed with being able to bend, shape, flake, and form public opinion. Again, he gets it right, finally. Now, if he would just remember this every day, if he would remember that little paragraph that the vast majority of the stuff that he's reading about is crap. It's just ginned up hysteria. That's what I'm saying when I say that they're arbitrary claims. Okay? All he needs to do is he gets some piece of news in front of him and say, read it, and then say, read maybe the headline and say, this is arbitrary and I'm not going to comment on it, and move on to the next one. And this way, he's not going to burn himself out. He can make a comment real quick and move on to the important things. You know, get through all the crap and just say, this is crap, this is crap, this is crap, this is crap. Or if he wants to, just skip it all. If anybody calls and asks him about it, he just says, it's arbitrary. They're arbitrary claims and I'm not going to bother with them. And then get to the ones in which there is at least some evidence, some proof of something that's going right, wrong, or otherwise. And then spend your time, energy thinking about and responding to those. And I think he would find it a lot easier. He wouldn't find himself on the radio saying, I'm sick and tired of this, I'm sick and tired of that. He wouldn't find himself basically getting burned out. Back to Rush. You know what? They're not able to anymore. And this, as much as anything, I don't mean to degenerate their hatred for Trump because that's as strong and as high as ever, but their desire to prove themselves that they can still bend and shape public opinion is what's driving a lot of this hysteria. And they're readily recognizing that they can't, and it's new territory for them, so they're getting even more hysterical as each day comes and goes. Again, he's right. So he's like 3 for 3. The only problem with it is that he is noting that they are shaping public opinion. He doesn't quite recognize and put together that for the left, shaping public opinion is shaping reality. Okay, for the left, objectivity doesn't exist. Everything is subjective. And so therefore, you can shape reality. In other words, the shorthand way of putting it is reality is what the majority says it is. Okay? Something's good or bad or right or wrong, or did a specific event occur in a specific way at a specific place and time. That what does the majority say? Well, the majority says that it did. So therefore, that's what reality is. And then we move on. And that they are, by shaping public opinion, the news media, are shaping reality itself. Now, once this starts to slip away, once there's contradictions that are being presented to them, the election of Donald Trump is the biggest contradiction, then that, of course, it drives them out of their mind. You're talking about something that's deep in your psyche. These people pretend, because there's no way they can really believe it, but they pretend and pretend and pretend. It's almost like a hope or a wish. Getting up every day, oh, I hope, I wish, I hope, type of thing. But they're so invested in this. Let's put it that way. They're so invested in the idea of being a reality shaper that when something comes along to defy them and their ability to shape reality, it's panic. They can't psychologically deal with it. It's a threat to their sanity. It is an absolute threat to their sanity. That's why they're after Trump. Because Trump is just an absolute threat to their sanity. If they could get rid of Trump, I think they would spend little or no time ever talking about him again. They wouldn't make any, as far as they're concerned, I think it would be like what Stalin used to do when somebody fell out of favor with him and you had official photographs, they would remove them. They would simply erase them from the official photographs. I guess they get the negative and erase the person from that photograph as though they never existed, and then reissue the pictures. And so I think that if the left could do it, if they could get rid of Donald Trump, get him to resign, then they would probably never talk about him again. They would never note any type of accomplishment. Whoever it is that took over, they would just act as though they took over as soon as President Obama left. Kind of thing. So if it was Pence, then they would act like that as much as they possibly could. Again, pretending that they are reality shapers. So back to Rush. And folks, you watch this, and when you have the Woodward book out there, and Bob Woodward's advising everybody that we need to really get serious about examining the psychology and mental fitness of Donald Trump. And I'm going to tell you, it's just the exact opposite. If anybody is close to a breakdown, it's people in the media and people on the left. If there's anybody in desperate need of some psychological help, it's those people, not Donald Trump and not you and me. So, again, absolutely correct. But it's a little bit perhaps deeper than that, in that there is a philosophical, intellectual error that they're going through. And basically what they're doing actually is lying to themselves. It's not even an error. Anybody that tells you, well, if you talk about reality and they say, well, how can you be sure? They're lying. And you know they're lying by the way they act. They look both ways when they cross the street, etc. So you know they're lying. Okay? So don't let people trick you on that one, on the reality question. Gee, how do you know? It's one of those things where if you engage in a debate about it, you lose just by engaging the debate. Okay? You want to debate reality, you lost. Period. There's no debate about it. It's the same thing if you're a Christian and somebody wants to debate you about the existence of God. No. As soon as you entertain that argument, As soon as you say, yes, I'll debate you about the existence of God, you lost. You have lost. Because when you say, let's have a debate, you're conceding the possibility that God does not exist. Same thing with reality. Hey, how do we know? And just by saying, well, let me explain it to you, let me run it down to you how reality works, you're conceding that maybe it doesn't. As a matter of fact, you've already conceded that it isn't. Because you are acknowledging and paying respect to his idea because the person that questions reality is saying, I don't see it. I don't see reality. Where is it? If you come along, try to point it out to him, you're validating that lie. So you can't do it. You have to call him a liar. Well, I don't know. I don't see it. I mean, how do you know you're a liar? I know the same way you do, by the evidence of our senses. Those are the kinds of answers that you give them. Okay, so that was Rush Limbaugh, and again, every once in a while he hits it right on the button. I hope he continues like this, and and he starts to see that things are a little bit deeper than just politics. He gets a little bit into psychology. Hopefully, he'll understand and do some research and read about things philosophical to see where the true foundation for all of his ideas and everyone's ideas come from. So we will see. When I come back, we're going to be doing the philosophy series. First is going to be philosophy and House, and then philosophy and Breaking Bad. Okay, thank you very much. Welcome back. Let's see, there it is. Nope, that's the wrong one. Let's try that again. There it is. Okay. Philosophy and House. And where we left this was, and every chapter in this book is dealing with a different philosopher. We were dealing with Sartre in the previous chapter. This chapter, we're dealing with Nietzsche. Now, Nietzsche really wasn't a philosopher. He was a philologist. He studied old manuscripts. He was sort of drafted, or he had the philosopher label just pasted on him after he died. He had written some novels. He was also a novelist, and he wrote some novels. And some of his friends decided to pretend that these novels had philosophical import, that they had things philosophical to say, which they really don't. They're more attitudinal or psychologistic than philosophical. So, Men and Supermen is the section in this chapter that we're on. On the one hand, Nietzsche often writes as if there are no current supermen. The Superman belongs to the future. Never yet has there been an Übermensch, says Nietzsche's fictional character Zarathustra. So the Overman remains an ideal type, what the human species only potentially can become. Man is, quote, man is a rope tied between beast and Übermensch, unquote. Nietzsche often suggests that the course of an entire culture, even a mediocre society, is justified if it produces a few superior beings. On the assumption that no one presently meets the criteria for the Overman, then, of course, House could not. However, what Nietzsche sometimes imagines for some future superior class, he suggests has already happened somewhat by accident in individuals from many different spheres of our culture, religious, military, and artistic. Among them we can find the names Napoleon, Goethe, Jesus, Caesar, and Shakespeare. If we were to consider Dr. House in this context, we need to think of his hospital as a microcosm of the world at large, and House an individual of obvious achievement and influence relative to that environment. Nietzsche's more provocateur than prophet. Of course, so is House. Nietzsche's words are often charges against his readers and challenges them to act in ways that define the norm. Man is something that needs to be overcome, and Zarathustra asks of everyone and no one, what have you done to overcome him? What have you done to move beyond the ordinary to become more like this superior being. And also, it seems to be a question with Nietzsche that is arbitrary, again, because the logical response to his question is twofold. So what, and why bother? Why do I need to do this? Where does he come up with this idea of a Superman? How does he know that any such thing exists? But again, all of that is, if you're going to go ahead and take what he's writing seriously, what he writes should be taken strictly as entertainment, much like a comic book. You don't question Superman or Batman. You don't question Spider-Man and all that. How could this be, and take it seriously and really break it down and analyze it. That's where people go wrong with Nietzsche. He was a novelist. He wrote for entertainment, and that's the way his books should be read, for entertainment, assuming they have any entertainment value. I haven't read any of them, but they sound rather dreary to read. House's character. House's teacher can be seen in two ways. First, there is a House who works his diagnostic magic, solving special cases for the sake of solving alone, just like one might attempt a crossword puzzle. We can imagine this House indifferent to the education of his staff and not particularly interested in the welfare of his patients. Second, there's the House who teaches character. House isn't offering additional medical knowledge alone. Rather, from House, his young staff can learn the virtues of the overman, which are not to be found in Gray's Anatomy. House wants his staff to think independently, to overcome their previous education. To do this, they will need a special kind of courage. The courage to stand up in the profession and voice objections over the desires of patients, and in spite of restrictions imposed by their own superiors. House teaches the need for the energy and tenacity to look beyond the solutions found in the medical books, to resist the defeatism that often leads to wrong turns, and the willingness to take risks and to exercise imagination. By example, House teaches blunt patient interview and insightful observation. House is often able to see that a patient is lying out of fear or embarrassment. Or he can notice personality quirks that offer Holmesian clues to complex diseases. But unless House overturns standard analyses, he will fail the patient. He succeeds as teacher only if his pupils can see beyond the strictly medical in a narrow sense of the word, and expand the traditional role of doctor. House exemplifies a doctor with the discipline and self-will to control and overcome the professional status quo. Eschewing professional rewards and inertia-laden contentment, House does not hesitate to act in underhanded ways to encourage the progress of his staff and to solve the often bizarre problems laid out for them. And basically, Nietzsche was the themes of his novels was power. That's part of what makes a lot of his work so attractive. Everybody loves power. Power is sexy. And one of the tenets of power is might makes right. Another one is the ends justify the means. And that's what the author has just gotten done doing, saying, and praising House for this, saying that House believes the ends justify the means. And he does. If you've ever watched this series and watch him work, he obviously believes the ends justify the means. They do not. They never do. And but again, the author is praising him, saying that acting as though this is some type of virtue for House, because he's overcoming the regular, the mundane, and he's pushing to become an Ubermensch or something like that. And so, but the might doesn't make right. The ends don't justify the means. But that's what you're going to find. And again, culturally, a lot of shows, a lot of television shows in our culture glorify power and glorify ruthlessness. Because that's what, when you say the ends justify the means, might makes right, that's ruthlessness. And they're glorifying that. It's glorified in House. It's glorified in Breaking Bad. It's glorified in the Burn Notice. That was another one in which the ends justified the means, and it was glorified. It wasn't pointed out as a character defect, but as some kind of an asset. Although in the end of all these shows, the anti-heroes all end up dead. They all end up dead, except for House. I don't know what happens to him. I didn't watch the end of that particular series. I know that he did end up he was in jail or in prison for a period of time. But anyways, when next time it'll be the double standard. It'll be the next section in this particular chapter. And when I come back, it's going to be philosophy and Breaking Bad. And thank you very much. Thank you. And I wanted to say about that these books have subtitles. And Philosophy and House, the subtitle is, what is the subtitle of that one? It is Everybody Lies. Because that's what House goes around saying all the time. That's what he's always looking for, the lie. And what he does when he's going through supposedly the intellectual process, most of the time it's psychology. Some observation included in it, but it's basically psychology. He's playing a psychologist. It has nothing to do with philosophy or intellectual or reasoning or anything of that nature. So anyways, Breaking Bad, this is Philosophy and Breaking Bad, and the subtitle of this is Badder Living Through Chemistry. So we were in Breaking Bad, we were in the section where they're listing all the people that Walt has killed. And we've gone through two of them. Last one was a drug dealer named Crazy 8. So this section is about Jane. Jesse's girlfriend, Jane, was a recovering junkie, building an honest new life as a manager of her father's apartment complex and pursuing a job as a tattoo designer. Unfortunately, she met Jesse, an active drug dealer and addict. The net result is predictable, as she slips back into drug addiction and introduces Jesse to heroin. Addicted to heroin and in love with Jesse, Jane convinces him to turn against his partner and blackmail Walt to give Jesse his share of their drug profits. Walt knows full well that Jane and Jesse will inject the money straight into their veins, likely dying of overdoses, but at least wasting their lives. Nonetheless, he relents, realizing he must let Jesse make his own choices, and tries to deliver Jesse's money. In the process, he accidentally knocks a heroin-addled Jane onto her back in bed next to Jesse, and Jane vomits, chokes, and dies in front of Walt while Jesse remains deeply drugged and asleep. So, to what degree is Walt responsible for Jane's death? And I would say that he was indirectly responsible for it. He did nothing to, because I saw that particular episode, and he just sat there because he was horrified that she was choking to death, but he didn't do anything to help her. All he had to do, turn her on her side, let her, let the vomit come out, and she probably would have lived. He could have done just at least as little as that. But he didn't because he saw the opportunity. She was blackmailing him. And part of his issue was, although, yes, he wanted to give Jesse his fair share, he also knew that that the blackmail would never stop. As long as he was dealing drugs, and he believed he needed to deal meth in order to make enough money to pay for his medical bills, then Jesse and his girlfriend would have their hooks into him, and they would be blackmailing him for the rest of his life. So when she starts to choke, he sees the opportunity, of course, to let her die and thereby get rid of his problem. Get rid of the blackmail. So that wraps up another episode of The Drill, and until next time, thank you very much for listening, and have a great day.